Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Display Line podcast. I'm your host, Ollie,
And I'm your other host, Joey.
and today we'll be taking you through recent aviation news, events, air shows, and air show aircraft announcements. So, first up, the news. Joey, would you like to take us through the first bit of the news today?
So we have the news of a Sun Express Boeing 737's landing gear collapsing whilst taxiing to a runway in Turkey, specifically Antalya. I can't pronounce that. You might be able to.
Yeah, so it collapsed while it was taxiing to the runway in Antalya, Turkey, and it was going to Gaziantep. All we know is everyone was completely fine, and it was actually just a slight malfunction in the gear. So yeah, all we know is that this aircraft's landing gear collapsed while taxiing to the runway for takeoff. Obviously, it was at Antalya, and it did, and everyone was safe. Everyone was completely fine. No injuries were reported on this flight, so that's a very good start to the news that at least no one was injured. Next
Yeah,
up on the news, we have Porter Airlines slid off a runway due to snow and ice at Halifax Airport. This aircraft was an Embraer E195-E2, flight 209 from Toronto to Halifax. When landing, it landed on runway 14, and luckily everyone was unharmed. The plane registration for this was C-GKXH, and Porter Airlines is a Canadian airline that transports people across North America, basically just Canada.
yeah. It is also important to note that the news we've got here is not all the news from the last 2 weeks, because obviously we didn't do one last week because I was on holiday. There is a lot of news. We just wouldn't be able to fit it all in. Um, But we have some of the more important news for this.
And as a lot of people in North America and Canada will know, there's been a huge blizzard recently, huge snowstorms widespread across sort of the northeast of America and the sort of northeast and south and that
Yeah,
sort of
it's
place in
still
Canada.
still happening right now. In New York, especially, I've seen a lot of videos of blizzards going on in New York. So it's not good conditions for planes at all.
Yeah, it's quite severe weather. I believe there's been up to about 15 inches in some places of New York and places like that. And this is just not the right conditions for planes to be landing in. Luckily, everyone was unharmed, like we just said, and the plane was evacuated completely fine.
Yeah, and on the note of planes having issues, there was the Arik 737 engine failure that happened mid-flight on the 11th. Debris from the engine hit the vertical stabilizer. Um, it diverted to Benin Airport.
So this flight was flight 740 from originally from Lagos to Port Harcourt, but it did have to divert to Benin Airport, like Joey just said. The tail registration on this was 5N-MJF, and all 80 passengers on board were safe.
Yeah, which is of course the most important part is everyone was safe.
And luckily, within this recent news that we're bringing you today, everyone seems to be unharmed so far. However, this can't be said for the F4 Phantom that crashed in the Iranian regime in Hamidian region due to malfunction. Currently, one pilot is in critical condition in the hospital. However, one pilot is confirmed dead at the scene.
Yeah, so obviously there is quite a lot of tensions in the area. So they're doing a lot of training right now, which obviously will lead to increased risks in terms of uh, flights having issues. We don't know what the malfunction was at this moment, but it did crash, and there was unfortunately a fatality.
And with the F4 Phantom being an incredibly old sort of Vietnam War era aircraft, they're very, very unstable, and all air forces have really retired them other than Greece, Turkey, and Iran. And the parts are very, very limited to these aircraft because America refuses, obviously, to give any spare Phantom parts that they probably lack in the first place anyway, as Iran is an
Yeah,
enemy of the US.
especially especially to places like Iran that are enemies. You're not going to get any spare parts from anyone.
Exactly, and I think that with these lack of spare parts, things like the F14 that they also have there all falling apart with the lack of that they even have left in the first place. The F4s are poorly maintained, as this sort of crash very clearly shows, and
Yeah,
sort of their F5 fleet is depleting as well. So their inventory of aircraft is very quickly depleting and they're running out of aircraft just due to lack of parts and things like that. And it's
Yeah,
quite a shame, really, because they're quite vintage aircraft like the F4 and the F14 Tomcat. And
yeah,
obviously, you want to see those planes and jets display at places like Riyadh or any display such as Cosford, for example, or even Oshkosh,
yeah.
because I know quite rare planes go to Oshkosh.
Yeah, and I believe I might be wrong on this, but I believe the last F-14, operational F-14 in Iran was destroyed, I think at the end of last year,
I believe
which is
so.
a shame to be fair. Yeah,
The F14 is always loved by aviation fans such as ourselves, just because of the legacy behind it. It's just such an amazing aircraft, and it was obviously featured in the Top Gun film, the first movie with Maverick and Goose. And from there, I think that it just became an absolute legend within the aviation community.
yeah, it's definitely one of the most notable fighter jets in the, well, all time really.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like I said, it's such a shame that the last flying F-14s have been destroyed, even if it is due to a war and stuff like that. It's always a shame to see these legendary aircraft go slowly out of service and with lack of
Yeah.
parts, just like the F4.
You can see these in some museums, I'm pretty sure. I don't know which ones, but I'm sure if you Google it, you will find maybe even some close museums to you. I don't doubt there'll be some in America, especially, um, showing off the F-14, just unfortunately not flying.
Yeah, I'll probably have a picture up on screen now of places where you can find these, or just pictures of these aircraft in museums. I know I believe in America, there's an F-14 sat on a stationary aircraft carrier.
Uh, Possibly, I think I've heard that somewhere, but I
Yeah,
can't remember.
I'm pretty sure there's an aircraft carrier museum that has loads of vintage aircraft, and I believe there's an SR-71 like right next to it as well. So
Yeah, that is all the news we had listed on our notes, just because there's been 2 weeks and there is so much news, we have not noted all of it down. But we have got a few more important stories from the last week or so, such as the F-22s that transferred to RAF Lakenheath, headed towards the Middle East. They just, as of today, as of this morning, took off and headed to an air base in Israel, I believe. I can't confirm this. I haven't seen it, like any pictures of it, but I have heard people saying one did turn around due to a possible fuel leak and landed back at RAF Lakenheath. But I
yes,
have not confirmed this. I've just seen people mention it.
yeah, I believe that it definitely did. There's definitely pictures out there, and Aaron Rains, which is quite a good aviation blogger and vlogger. He talks about this a lot, and he mentioned it briefly earlier that one did have to turn around, but all 11 did make it safely to the airbase. With at least four aerial refueling tankers accompanying them. However, the journey over from America to England was not quite as nice sailing as it was over to the Middle East, was it, Joey?
So yeah, they had a few issues during the transfer to the UK with a few tankers breaking down. I'm not too sure how many and how bad it hindered the transfer, but I do know that a few tankers did break down on the way.
Yeah, so it took them 3 attempts to finally make it over, and they did land. And there's people, loads of people actually at Lake and Heath. There's so many videos out there of just cars lining the road to see these legendary aircraft that aren't really seen in the UK at all, unless they are going to the Middle East. But
Yeah,
unfortunately, yeah, the tankers did break down twice on the way, so that completely hindered all operations of F-22s in the UK for about 1 week, 2 weeks, while they got replacement tankers to get them over. But yeah, after a few days of sitting at RF Lake and Heath, they have finally departed, as we've mentioned before.
now this is the largest deployment of air power from the US since the 2000s. Ollie will know the exact year, I think.
Yeah, so 2003. So they have so many F-35s over there. It's about 48 that people have counted. There's 11 Raptors over there as well, plus the two aircraft carriers and about 35 Strato tankers accompanying them as well, with some KC-10s and some rivet
Yep.
joints. all deploying over there. So there's hundreds of aircraft. No one actually knows the exact figure, but we can sort of make an estimate based on who's flown to what airbase and when they departed, and how many roughly would be on the aircraft carriers.
Yeah, this is obviously because of tensions with Iran. They've sent them all to the Middle East. Um, it's an intimidation tactic. It is interesting to see all the aircraft that have been sent over there.
Especially some of the rare ones, like we said, the Raptors coming over. They came over last year, and I believe the year before that. And a lot of people love them because they're such a rare aircraft. They never display in the UK, really. They don't have much displays anywhere in Europe. Mainly, they're an American-based display team. And go to places like Oshkosh and those sort of massive air shows over in America. So it's always nice seeing these huge bunches come over to the UK.
Yeah, they did RIAT in 2016, but that is the only time they have done an airshow in the UK, as far as I'm aware. But it it is not a common thing to see.
Exactly, and that's why everyone loves them so much. It's such a legendary jet, and hopefully they'll bring them into things like the 2040s, maybe even the 2050s, as quite an advanced fifth generation stealth fighter at the moment. I don't see why it should go out of service, other than servicing costs, really.
Yeah. In other news, on the fighter jet topic, there was two 41 Squadron Typhoons that took off at Coningsby from a taxiway to show the capabilities during a wartime scenario. You don't have as much time to get to a runway. You might need to take off too quick. So the taxiways at Coningsby are built to withstand a takeoff from Typhoons.
Exactly, especially when your runway may have been bombed to absolute smithereens, and you have to, have a last ditch resort where you have to take off the taxiways, and like Joey's just said, they're built to do so. So it's always nice testing that out and making sure the pilots are ready for a scenario, especially with the rising tensions over in places like Ukraine and Russia. And now we move over to Joey, our space expert, and he's got a lot of updates on the Artemis mission and space news.
Yeah, so on Artemis 2 has been, of course, delayed again to April 1st. Hopefully, it's not an April Fool's joke, and they actually take off this time. Uh, in other news, there was the Ariane 64's inaugural launch that went without fail. There was another Vulcan launch which suffered a nozzle failure. There was also the Vulcan launch, another Vulcan launch with another nozzle failure on the SRBs, which are the solid rocket boosters on the side. Very powerful, enough to tear off the nozzle for this particular flight. This has happened a few times, and it is a problem with Northrop Grumman, the people who make the B-2 Spirit. They make the solid rocket boosters for Vulcan, and it is a problem they've had in the past. So there'll probably be an investigation on this to figure out the problem. And since it's a repeated problem, they should probably look a lot more into this to figure out what is the underlying issue here.
Exactly, because space craft can be sort of the most dangerous. If something goes wrong, especially if humans are in them, like we discussed a few weeks ago when we first sort of mentioned Artemis, is the fact that disasters happen and it's known to happen. So we want to do everything we can to prevent those from happening, and to make space travel as well as safe as possible. Really, so less people are scared of it. I know I would rather not go to space right now. I think that's probably one of the scariest things that can happen because a lot of things can go wrong. But luckily, over the last 20, 30 years, the technology has improved, the manpower has improved, and overall, if one tiny thing has gone wrong, they'll cancel the whole mission and delay it till further means, really.
Yeah, space travel has gotten a lot safer in the last sort of 10 years has been the biggest jump
Yeah.
in safety with the Falcon 9 doing hundreds of launches in a row, reusing that booster up to 40 times, as far as I'm aware, with a single booster, and they have had hundreds of launches in a row without any issues. Uh, Several hundreds of successful missions in a row. Even if there is an issue with the booster landing, the main mission itself does always seem to go to plan,
Yes.
but it's still not a form of travel that I personally would go on, at least for a long time.
Now, Joey, you had a holiday recently throughout the half term, and you had something that you wanted added to the podcast. So feel free.
Yeah, so I was on a flight from Liverpool to Alicante. No, I was not going to Benidorm. And my flight did get diverted. This is the first time I have ever been on a flight that has been diverted. We got diverted to Valencia, which is 100 or so miles away, um, and then proceeded to wait an hour and a half for a bus, and then get stuck on 4 hours of bus journeys with women dressed as minions. So
Right.
that was,
Okay.
yeah,
And
yeah,
why
that
did it
was
get
fun.
diverted then?
Yeah, we had Category 1 hurricane force winds, and as we descended over some mountains, and unfortunately mistimed it and descended into a gust. And they said over the intercom that it exceeded the limit of the aircraft. We were the only flight that day, as far as I saw, to be diverted from Alicante. Uh, Landing, I believe there was a few that got diverted taking off as well. Um, but yeah, we got pretty unlucky descending into a gust.
Yeah. So that's pretty unlucky, especially as you had to get stuck on a bus for what 5.5 hours in total if you include the wait.
Yeah, it might have been a bit longer than that actually, because we did on the bus back to Alicante Airport. We did stop off because one of the three buses broke down. They then had to squish everyone from the broken down bus onto the two working ones, which is when I got stuck with the minions. And Gru was there too. Gru was very drunk actually, but I suppose when you're driving through Benidorm, you're gonna get a few drunk people.
Like Russian or Ukrainian or Belarus. He's somewhere in that region, and obviously those people are known to get quite drunk, especially as vodka was invented in Russia.
Yeah. Um, yeah, we did have to wait around half an hour, probably closer to an hour, at that petrol station uh, while they figured out how to squeeze everyone onto two buses. But other than that, it was all right. Obviously, we missed the podcast last week because I got back on the Thursday, something like that. And now I've got the typical thing that happens when you're back from a holiday. I'm ill. That seems to happen a lot after a holiday. I'm unsure why. It's probably to do with the travel and stress of travel. But it's fun.
And I'm a bit ill as well. My nose is incredibly itchy, and it's horrible filming this podcast. So we are trying our best this week, but the conditions aren't allowing us to. But that wraps up the news for this. Well, the past 2 weeks, the main news that we wanted to cover, as we can't get this section too long.
Moving on to part two of the podcast, and the topic of the podcast is Midlands Air Festival, which is held at Ragley Hall in Ulster every year. Ollie will know more about this than me because you frequently go there. I may be going there this year for the first time, although I'm not 100% sure on that yet. It just depends on whether I'm available.
So yeah, it's an annual air festival that's been going on since 2018, and it was started by Trevor Graham and James McDonald, which are still the show organisers. And it's a very nice air show to go to, I have to admit. There's such a variety of absolutely everything you can imagine. Aviation, things like hot air balloon launches in the morning, 6 a.m. in the morning, which is quite fun to watch. All the special shapes as well going up. They have everything from Thomas the Tank Engine to the Michelin Men and things like that. They have RC model displays. I can't remember who brings the models, but they have these really, really cool. I think 1/3 the size of the real model. I can't confirm that though. They have things like the P-47 and the Douglas Sky Raider as well. They use pyrotechnics in pretend World War II bombing run and tank displays. They have variety of aircraft as well. Things like biplanes, aerobatic biplanes, the BBMF, fast jets such as the Red Arrows, and this year the MiG 17, which we'll be getting to in the next part of the podcast.
Yeah, a little bit about the area for Midlands. I did a bit of research on this because I'm not too familiar with it. But Ragley Hall is a very old building from the 17th century, and it has around 400 acres of parkland for the air show to use. And it's usually home to the air show around May, sort of early June time. This year it's the 29th to the 31st of May.
And like I just previously mentioned about 2 minutes ago, the air displays consist of military, classic, and civilian aircraft, such as the Red Arrows, BBMF, Spitfires, Cold War jets such as the MiG-17 and F-86 Sabre. Rich Goodwin usually goes there in his jet pitch, which is featured in a few podcasts ago when he was announced at Hampshire. And the hot air balloons and RC model displays as well that are scattered throughout the day. There's usually an RC model and hot air balloon in the morning, and there's usually one in the evening, depending on the winds for the hot air balloons. But there's always a nighttime pyrotechnic show and a night glow on the Friday with the hot air balloons.
And that's usually done with an extra 300 or 330 from the Global All-Stars and a few gliding displays, usually from Tim and Tom Dews. I'm not too familiar with the pronunciation of that.
Yeah, always great displays from Tim and Tom Jews and the Global All Stars. Very, very nice solo display. The Global All Stars actually 300 does a solo display in the daytime, and then on the night fire and night glow does a nice pyrotechnic display with hundreds of LEDs down the side of it. Usually green. I do have a photo of it. I'll try and find it and put it up on the screen for you now. And Tim and Tom Jews in the NHS gliders as well. They have up to 2,000 LEDs on the aircraft, on each aircraft, along with some firework pyrotechnics as well. And so far, the confirmed lineup of aircraft includes the OV-10 Bronco, which is always lovely aircraft to see, and was a replacement aircraft listed for last year. The P-51D Maranelle that usually goes to Little Granston. I have actually a few pictures of that. I'll put them up on the screen now. The Stomp display team, which hopefully we might be getting on the podcast in a few weeks in a later episode. The Rolls-Royce Heritage Spitfire, which is the blue photo reconnaissance version. The Calidus Autogyro that we mentioned in Blackpool's podcast. The Catalina, not also known as Miss Pickup, which we also mentioned in the Blackpool episode. The HF300S, which we've just been talking about for the night fire and solo display. And this year we've got the Westland Sea King and the Whirlwind helicopter roll demos. Now, the Sea King went last year, but the Whirlwind is new for this year. So hopefully those will be very nice roll demos to see. The MiG-17F has been recently added to the program, and we'll be talking about that next in the next part. Hot air balloons, loads of shapes to see, small, large, Michelin men, as previously mentioned, and the RC model displays. However, this is not the final schedule, and we are hoping for more announcements in the coming days and weeks. Adding on to that, though, from when we made this, the Grumman Turbo Firecat has also been announced, which we'll also be talking about in the next part.
So obviously quite an exciting lineup. I hope to be there to witness it. However, if I'm not, I know that you will be getting some great pictures of the aircraft.
And talking about Midlands Air Festival, hopefully you'll be going, but even if it's just me, we do now have merch that we will be giving out at the showgrounds if you come up to us, and we might even just give it out to people if they want it. So we have these lovely, lovely key rings. Unfortunately, they're back to front because of the camera, but they have our Linktree barcode on the back, which will take you to all our podcasts, and our logo on the front. Thank you to my mother who helped me make these. And we've got different colours here. So this is a green one, and Joey has his own one. I also have my own one, which looks like this. It just has the logo and all our socials around the outside with the barcode there as well to the Linktree with a blue one here. We have all sorts of colours, all spectrum of the rainbow, from black to white and red to purple, which is very nice. I don't know where the pens have gone, but we do also have pens. I'll put a picture up on screen now because my mum sent me a picture earlier. And we also have these display line cups as well, which have the barcode on the back and our logo on the front. They do come with a straw, but the straw's in the box to send to Joey at the moment because all this stuff is going to Joey for places like Blackpool Air Show because he's
Yeah.
going to that. We also do have limited time sort of jumpers. If the demand is there, we can 100% get more. But we've got this at the moment, so it has a massive logo on the front. And because me and Joey are the host of this, we have our names on the back, as you can see here, with all our social around the outside, just like the keychain and the barcode at the bottom with our picture of the logo. if you do get a jumper, then you won't have the name on it unless you specifically ask for it. However, if you do have a name, you'd probably also have fan above it. Just so you know, you're a fan, we're the host. It just sort of makes a bit of sense so people don't get
Yeah,
confused. However, you don't have to have a name on it. You can just have a plain background. We may also do t-shirts as well. Just again, it's just if the demand is there, really. But yeah,
yeah.
pens and
Hopefully,
keychains will be mainly free. If you want to donate a 50p, go ahead, why not? And
yeah,
finally, we have these patches. Now, currently, the print is not on them. That's something that I'm going to be working on with Mum over the coming weeks to make these. But yeah, they'll have the display line logo on the front, and the patches will have a barcode on the back.
yeah, and hopefully by the next episode, and maybe the one after that, I will have my own hoodie and I'll be wearing it for the episode.
Yeah, so Joey will have his name on the back. I have my name on the back, and it just sort of depends if you want your name there or not. But yeah, we're thinking of maybe putting hosts on the back just so people might come up to us more. I guess it depends on how people are feeling. But that's what we're going to be doing at air shows. Come up to us. Feel 100% free to come up to us and grab some merch or order it online. If you text us on our Instagram, which we will put, well, I mean, you can just scan this barcode right here and it should take you to the link tree where our Instagram is. If you send us a DM on the Instagram, let us know what you want, and we will try and get that to you. So, part 3 of this podcast. Now we've got all the interesting stuff to come now. So, the MiG 17F is displaying at Midlands Air Festival. That is our first takeoff Thursday for this week. Joey, would you like to talk us through some interesting facts about this aircraft?
Yeah, the MiG-17F is one of the most renowned USSR aircraft from that sort of era. It had its first flight on the 14th of January in 1950. It then entered service 2 years later in 1952. Uh, it is the improved evolution of the MiG-15 with a larger wingspan and an afterburner. MiG-15 did not have an afterburner. It is designed to improve high-speed stability and combat maneuverability.
Yes. So it had a crew of one. However, in trainer variants, it had a crew of two. The length of it was 11.26 meters. The wingspan was 9.63 meters, and the height was 3.8 meters. The empty weight of this aircraft was 3,900 kilograms, but the maximum takeoff weight was just under double that at 6,000 kilograms. The engine it used was a Klivmov VK1F turbojet with an afterburning turbofan engine and had a top speed of Mach 0.93 or 1,150 kilometers per hour, with a range of 2,000 kilometers with drop tanks on its wings.
Yeah, this aircraft had a climb rate of a whopping 65 meters per second, and it could boast a lot of different weaponry. Its main armament was the 37 millimeter N37 cannon with 40 rounds. It also had two 23 millimeter NR23 cannons with 80 rounds each, and it could hold up to 500 kilograms of bombs and or rockets.
Now, note down that the 500 kilograms of bombs and rockets is sort of a switch around with the external fuel tanks. So you sort of swap out the fuel tank for some bombs or rockets, or you swap out the bombs and rockets for some fuel tanks. It's sort of either way, as they don't have that many hard points on the wings. But it had some humongous cannons. If you get hit by any of these cannons, your plane is in shreds, especially in those days with the type of metal they used. However, it wasn't made for dogfighting, unlike the MiG-15, its predecessor. It was more used for a bomber interceptor. So this mainly became apparent in things like the Taiwan Strait crisis, where things like the F-86 Sabre would just out dogfight it, outmaneuver it, and it was just in no class of its own. It was at the bottom really in dogfighting, and its main role was just to take out bombers. Hence the huge cannons to rip through the armor, the heavily armored bombers of that time. Now, the MiG 17 had about five major versions, not including the Chinese version and the Polish version, which we'll get to at the end. So, the MiG 17 was the initial design. The MiG 17F was the afterburner equipped variant. The MiG 17PF was the radar equipped interceptor. The MiG 17PFU was the missile armed interceptor. The Shenyang J 5, Now that's the Chinese variant there. That was basically a copy paste of the MiG 17, and the Lim 5 or Lim 6 is the Polish built variant.
Moving on to an aircraft that was announced for Hampshire Air Festival, we have the Firebirds. We touched on those briefly when talking about the pyrotechnics. But they are a duo aerobatics display team. They were originally formed in 2015 under the name Fireflies, but in 2022 they were rebranded as the Firebirds, and new pilots took over.
Yeah, Joey, as you just said, they were taken over in 2022 and rebranded, sorry, to the Firebirds. Now, I have seen the Fireflies before, back at Bournemouth Air Festival in the daytime. Those displays were always beautiful, very nice formation displays by two Vans RV4 aircraft. They are very well renowned pilots, fly mainly evening and twilight shows. However, they do also do daytime shows. So they are doing a split at Hampshire Air Festival. So on one of the days they're doing a daytime, and one they're doing a twilight show. These aircraft operate from LEC Airfield in West Sussex, which is actually where quite a lot of these smaller display teams are based. And like I just mentioned, they use Van's RV4 kit aircraft, which was designed by Richard Van Grunsven.
The RV4 prototype first flew in August of 1979 and has become one of the best-known aerobatic kits worldwide. It is very popular for sports and aerobatic flying. It was designed for specifically sport aerobatics, and the wider RV family as a whole, including the RV6 and 7, as well as a few others, has a reputation for the crisp handling, high roll rates, and ease of use in close formation work, and is one of the best-selling family of kit aircraft in history.
Yeah, so the RV6 and RV7 are mainly used by Team Raven. I believe they recently changed variants, but all the Vans RV aircraft, very aerobatic, used by quite a lot of teams like Team Raven, like the Firebirds. They're very, very popular for these aerobatic shows just because of how nice they are to handle, how responsive they are, how aerobatic they are. Now, you wouldn't think they were very aerobatic aircraft, but honestly, they can do loop the loops about as well as a fighter jet can. Now, as we move on to the performance and stats of this aircraft, the maximum speed is 341 kilometers an hour, or 184 knots, and it is powered by a Lycoming O360 engine that produces up to 180 horsepower. Now, as the maximum speed is about 341 kilometers per hour, the cruise speed is about 320, which equates to about 170 knots. Its range is 950 kilometers or 510 miles and has a service ceiling of 7,000 meters or 23,000 feet. Now, that's quite high, Joey, I would say, considering the fact that it's a propellered aircraft and these things are mainly designed to be low level aerobatic aircraft.
Yeah, they built it with more wing area so they could fit more ailerons on there to increase the maneuverability of the aircraft, but that did also increase the service ceiling to 23,000 feet. And you mentioned the cruise speed being 320 kilometers an hour, which is not far behind the max speed, which is pretty unusual for aircraft. You typically have a cruise speed much less than the max speed. But for this aircraft specifically, it's only about 14 knots behind the max speed.
Now, Joey, what would you say is better? Would you say Team Raven is better, or would you say the Firebirds are better? I know they use slightly different aircraft, however, the idea behind the display is relatively the same, just with more aircraft on Team Raven's side.
No, I mean, I'm not going to say who's better because I don't even have an answer for that. I've only ever seen Team Raven. I have not seen the Firebirds themselves. If I was to go and see one tomorrow, just for the pure spectacle of a Twilight show, which I have personally never seen, I would go and see the Firebirds. But Team Raven is an incredible display. They have more aircraft, so they have a lot more range in terms of what they can do. But a Twilight display is something incredible to see. I do hope to see one at some point soon.
Yeah, I guess it's quite subjective saying which display you'd rather prefer because they both do different things. The Firebirds do twilight displays, and Team Raven do large aerobatic displays at places like Blackpool Air Show and Midlands Air Show they've been going to for the last few years. And I mean, Team Raven's about quadruple the size of the Firebirds, which may be sort of an overestimate considering the fact that the Firebirds only use two aircraft and Team Raven use about eight. But I think you sort of get the message.
Yeah.
So, like we said, the Lycoming 0360 produces up to 180 horsepower, but the aircraft itself can pull plus 6G and minus 3G. Now, that is pretty close to fighter jet levels, wouldn't you say, Joey?
Yeah, there are fighter jets themselves that which cannot reach those Gs. You get a lot of fighter jets that can reach upwards of 9 Gs, but in terms of a propeller aircraft, 6 Gs is impressive.
Exactly, and like you said, some fighter jets can't get up to that max G limit, and I know they're a lot faster, and they'll probably be doing turns about triple, if not quadruple, the speed of this aircraft. But the fact that a light propeller sport aerobatic aircraft can pull plus six and negative 3Gs is, I think that's amazing, to be honest.
Yeah, you obviously get the negative 3Gs being pushed into the cockpit of the aircraft, being pushed up out of your seat, which is not very comfortable. And a lot of displays try and mitigate the negative G load. But there are a few aircraft and displays that do kind of lean into the negative Gs. You've got the Typhoon display team, which does the upside down maneuver, pulling minus a few Gs.
Yeah.
They even mention on the commentary how weird feeling it is for the pilot to pull negative Gs. So negative 3 is quite a lot in terms of Gs.
I mean, yeah, exactly. When you're pulling negative Gs, all of the blood in your body is being basically forced up to your head, which can make it incredibly uncomfortable in the cockpit, actually. Plus six is probably more manageable, considering the fact all the blood's being drained out of your head, and obviously it mitigates the risk of having a brain aneurysm. I know that sort of seems a bit weird, but when your blood vessels being forced into this negative G and all the blood in your body is being forced to your head, it can cause serious brain injuries if sort of not managed or done too often.
Yeah, and 6 Gs is a good figure because that is the typical limit before anyone without G training passes out. So if any person without G training was to go in one of these aircraft and pull that many Gs for a sustained period of time, they would probably pass out, which is why they do a lot of training before they do stuff like these displays.
Now, these limits are more of a suggested limit rather than a actual limit. You could probably push it to plus seven, maybe plus eight at a stretch, and probably minus four. Probably not minus five, definitely minus four. But like Joey just said, you need intense G training to be able to pull these Gs in the first place.
Yeah, it happens all the time in real life, in cars, especially with speed limits. People will actively push you to aim for the speed limit, to drive at the speed limit. So if you list the limits of your aircraft to the actual limits, people will push it to that more often. Whereas if you list the limit as, say, 6 Gs instead of 8, people will tend to stick to that 6G limit and not push the aircraft beyond something safe repeatedly, especially with 6 Gs, if you go to 7 Gs in this aircraft a few times for sustained periods, you will probably bend the airframe, maybe even form a few cracks. Moving on to another aircraft that was announced for Midlands Air Festival is the Grumman Turbo Firecat. Would you like to talk us through a bit about the aircraft?
So yeah, the aircraft is made by Grumman, and its name is the Connor S2T Turbo Firecat. Now, this specific Firecat has a registration of FAYFT, and it wears the famous Security Seville Tanker Identity T15, and it represents one of the most distinctive firefighting conversions ever to reach the European display scene. Now, this aircraft did go to Sanacol Air Show last year in Belgium. However, it's come over, luckily, to the Midlands Air Festival for the first time ever to this air show, and I think it's going to be a very, very exciting display. Now, it carries a retardant tank, whether it keeps water in this instance, but in the actual firefighting scenario, it would use proper retardant. Like you would see that red stuff that comes out those MD10s and MD11s in America. Now, the turbo firecat conversion replaced the original piston engines with turboprops, increasing the maximum speed and efficiency of the aircraft. Now, efficiency is key to making a amazing design in an aircraft, and the more efficient the aircraft is, Joey, the more you're going to be able to put it on the market.
Yeah, efficiency is key in aircraft, because the more efficiency you have, the longer your range, the higher your speed can be. It's basically just how far you can go on as much fuel as you use. The more efficient, the further you can go on the same amount of fuel. Uh, Changing to turboprops did increase the efficiency of this aircraft by a noticeable amount. They felt that the efficiency increase to changing to turboprops was worth the money that they spent on the change from piston engines to turboprops.
Yeah, so turboprop aircraft are usually more expensive to actually buy, but overall they're so much more efficient, and the money you can save on things like fuel is just so much better than with a piston aircraft. And like you just said, they just felt that having a turboprop is just way more efficient, way more money efficient than having these piston engines. And I think that's pretty clear if we have a look at, the power and the max speed and the service ceiling of these aircraft, which I find quite surprising, but we'll get onto that in a second when we get to this performance of this aircraft.
Something they also added during this conversion was underwing fuel tanks to increase the distance and time it could fly for. Obviously, these aircraft are designed for firefighting. They don't have to fly too far for those. But during a display where they're flying with some high throttle settings for some of it, for half an hour upwards of half an hour for some, they will need a bit more fuel. So they added those underwing fuel tanks.
Now, unfortunately, this isn't a water capable landing aircraft. So there's other aircraft that you'll see in Italy that are able to land in the water and pick up water that way. This one just gets loaded up with retardant and water depending on the mission at hand. And the main places you actually usually see these aircraft in Europe is in places like mountain ranges, which you wouldn't think so because they're rather cold and why would there be a fire out there? But if you have watched the Planes 2 movie, you will sort of understand that there'll be hikers out there who can accidentally start a forest fire, and sometimes snow and water and rain isn't enough to stop a forest fire, especially with dry wood. So these aircraft will go out, and there'll probably be a marker plane. If you've ever seen the smoke planes that go ahead of these aircraft, there'll be one of those, and then it will know exactly where to drop this. And they are incredibly efficient at their job, which is why it was so adopted by the French mainly, which is where this aircraft is from.
Yeah, Canada also has a lot of firefighting aircraft. There is a lot of mountains in Canada, and like you said, there are people out there who could accidentally start a forest fire. And since these places are very difficult to reach with typical fire engines, a plane is the best way of getting to it.
Yeah, they're very remote areas that people go hiking in. And while the view is amazing, some inexperienced and maybe even experienced hikers may accidentally cause a fire. Their fault or not, these things happen and it's unfortunate, but that's why you have these aircraft to go put these fires out. And I think they've always done an amazing job at it. There's pilots 100% 24/7 ready to deploy to these fires, especially the Italians. There's always at least one or two firefighting planes up at a time, training or going to an actual fire. And firefighting aircraft may be arguably one of the most important aviation aircraft ever. Now, you have things like military and commercial, and you'd think, well, how would I go across to America? Or how would I go to Asia if there weren't commercial airliners? But how would you go to, the Swiss Alps and stuff where there's loads of pine trees and stuff if it all got burnt down? So.
It completed its first post-restoration flight on the 10th of October in 2023, which is fairly recent, at an airport which I cannot pronounce. It's in France. It'll be on screen. Um, but it's a fairly recent aircraft for air shows, and it's great that we get to see it in the UK, especially at Midlands, which hopefully I will be going to. I know Ollie's going to. It'll be a very interesting aircraft to see perform.
And you know what? Even if it's raining, it doesn't matter because this aircraft's going to drop water anyway, so it might as well be raining in the first place when this aircraft's displaying. Now, I'm not jinxing it. I'm not saying to the airshow gods, bring us rain. But I'm saying if it does happen to rain during this display, it's not really going to matter.
Yeah, they do hand out ponchos for people with the slipstream pass, uh, which is a bit more expensive, but you do get ponchos, so you will be fine if it does rain.
Exactly. Now, as we get onto the performance of this aircraft, its max speed is 426 kilometers an hour or 230 knots. Has a service ceiling of only 22,000 feet. Now, the reason why I said this is interesting is because the Van's RV4 can go 1,000 feet higher than this aircraft.
Yeah, this aircraft has a much wider wingspan, and for an aircraft that really excels in flying around the mountain areas, you would expect it to have a much higher service ceiling, but it only has a service ceiling of 22,000 feet.
Now, that's not always a bad thing. It doesn't really need to go that high, especially if it's only flying 20 minutes to the mountains. But it's just a bit surprising that you'd think a turboprop aircraft can only fly 1,000 feet lower than a little sports kit aeroplane.
Yeah, the service ceiling will depend on what is in the aircraft. If it is carrying flame retardant, it might be able to fly lower. I'm not sure if the service ceiling we have here is when it is full. I assume it is when it is empty, so it'll only have a max service ceiling empty at 22,000 feet, which will obviously be lower when it has flame retardant in it.
Now, this aircraft uses two PT-6A 67AF engines that both produce 1,424 horsepower each. Now, it has 5 blades on the propeller, which we'll put a picture of the Midlands picture up on the screen now so you can sort of see what we're talking about. We'll highlight that. And it uses Jet A1 fuel, and its base airframe is a Grumman S2 tracker.
Yeah, it has a tank capacity of 3,000, just under 3,400 liters, which you will fill up with the Jet A1 fuel.
So, our last announcement for this week is our first RIAT takeoff Thursday. Now, this is the exciting stuff here. Now we're starting to get into the RIAT announcements, which are huge, really. You could have anything from, the BBMF to a B2 bomber. Last year there was a B1 Lancer that went, which is rare in the pretty rare in the UK to display. So hopefully in the coming weeks it will be very, very exciting. So Joey,
Yeah.
do you want to tell us what this first aircraft is?
Yeah, it is the Finnish Air Force FA-18C, which I saw last year when I was stuck on the bus. Unfortunately, I didn't get many good pictures of it. We will put a picture up on the screen of the aircraft at some point. It is a solo display, flown by operational fighter pilots drawn from Fighter Squadron 31 of Karelia Air Wing, I might have mispronounced that, and Fighter Squadron 11 of the Lapland Air Wing.
Yeah, so each season, the Air Force will appoint a primary display pilot and a deputy display pilot. And when local regulations permit, the Finnish Hornets solo display is renowned for its use of long flare sequences that arc across the sky behind the jet. Now, unfortunately, the British Air Show Authority doesn't allow flares unless you absolutely beg them to be able to use flares. So unfortunately, you won't usually see flares at places like Riyadh. But if you go to Oshkosh or any airshow in America, really, you'll see flares being used willy nilly, really, from F-35s, F-22s, F-18s, absolutely every plane you can think of, really.
Yeah, flares at British air shows is a difficult one because of the way we class flares more as a weapon and explosive device than other countries, which means we have to keep it a bit further away on the tarmac from other aircraft, which is a bit difficult when you have to cram so many aircraft onto an airbase for an air show.
So the performance of this aircraft has a much faster speed than the last aircraft that we've been talking about. It can go Mach 1.8. That's almost double what the MiG 17 could go. It has 1,915 kilometers per hour to be exact. And its low level speed
Yeah,
capability is 1,300 kilometers an hour. So that's, flying at sort of sea level or very, very low above the ground.
yeah, it has an incredible service ceiling of 49,200 feet, which is over double the last aircraft we just talked about, and it has a very, very fast rate of climb. of 254 meters per second, or 50,000 feet per minute.
Yeah, so it uses two four F404 GE402 engines that produce 78.7 kilonewtons of force with their afterburners fully deployed. Now, the structure of this aircraft is made of metal and composites, and the armament includes an M61 20mm cannon, and it has up to 9 hardpoints to carry things like missiles, bombs, rockets, fuel pods, you name it, anything that you can put on a jet, and it will carry quite happily, really.
Yeah, the F-18 is one incredible aircraft because of how many variants it has. I don't have an exact figure, but it is quite a lot of variants.
So the first ever main model is the Legacy Hornet, and now we have the Super Hornet, which is in Australia, places like Australia and America. And recently, actually, Australia retired their Legacy Hornets, unfortunately, so that's a shame to see them go. But the noticeable difference, we'll put this up on screen, between the Legacy Hornet and the Super Hornet is if you look at the air intakes on the Legacy Hornet, it's sort of a rounder shape compared to the Super Hornet, which has basically a huge rectangle as its both air intakes. It's a very noticeable difference, and that's probably the key thing to look out for if you're trying to look for the difference between the two types.
Yeah, something I also find quite interesting is NASA themselves use F-18s quite a lot to test things because it's such a well-known aircraft. It's such a well-tested aircraft. They know just how reliable it will be for these specific tests.
Yeah, and the livery they put it on is beautiful. We'll show the NASA F-18 up on the screen now as well. And I just think that all NASA liveries are beautiful. We did speak briefly on it at sort of NASA Air Force with the Canberra incident a few weeks back, but I think that they probably have one of the best fleets out there. To be honest, they have the F-18s. They used to have F-5s as well. I'm not too sure if they still run those. They have the Canberra.
I don't
Well, they
think so.
had, yeah, they had the Canberra, which hopefully they can restore. But if not, then they had two of those back in the day, and now are down to one
Yeah,
or zero. But they have such a
yeah, there's
nice
no
fleet.
update on that one yet.
But hopefully we can get an update on that. But to be honest, that wraps up our Takeoff Thursdays. And this is again a very large chunk of our podcast. So we really do hope you've enjoyed. So a slight wrap up of the podcast. We've started off with some news, such as the Sun Express Boeing 737 landing gear collapsing, unfortunately. Everyone was okay. And again, the Porter Airlines sliding off the runway. Everyone was okay. However, the one time that someone isn't okay is with the Iranian F4 Phantom, which, like we said, is a very sad loss of an aircraft and the life of an innocent Iranian in his aircraft. He could just be under orders to, go out flying in this. Don't want to get too political, though. But in British Air Force news, the two Typhoons taking off the taxiway, showing a complete capable demonstration of what the RF is really true and powerful for.
Yeah, there was a lot of news that we couldn't cover, just purely because there was so much. There was quite a few major incidents, well, not major incidents, but quite notable incidents that we couldn't even put here because of just how many there were. But we felt we put the more important stuff in here.
Yeah, so next off, we covered Midlands Air Show, and we hope you really enjoyed this. I think this has been our best week on air show topics this week. I think we went through everything we possibly could have, and hopefully this entices you to come to Midlands Air Show. I do have to say it's probably one of the best air shows I have ever been to. And I'm not just saying that because it is this week's topic. I'm saying that because the displays there are crazy. F-86 Sabre all the way from Canada. What a rare aircraft. I know it was in the UK quite a lot last year in the display season, but come on, who doesn't want to see an F-86 Sabre? And this year, MiG-17 and the Turbo Firecat, another two crazy displays. And along with the, well, 100, 200 plus hot air balloons that attend there every year as well. Such a sight to see, especially with a stately home. It's a stately home that makes one of the biggest air shows in the UK.
Yeah, and hopefully by next week I will have confirmation as to whether I will also be going to Midlands. I'll probably mention it briefly next week. I do hope to go because of the mainly the MiG-17 was what enticed me the most. I have never seen one myself, so I hope to get some good pictures of it.
Yeah, we did also briefly touch on the merch. which hopefully you will get in contact with us. If not, maybe at air shows. Hopefully, we see you there as we try and grow our fan base. But next up, we touched on the MiG 17, the huge announcement from Midlands. We posted it on our Instagram, which you probably saw on Monday. We hope you enjoyed that video, and it reached, as time of the recording on Tuesday, already 300 views in less than 24 hours of recording this video. We've already reached 20 likes on it, and I think, considering that the last few videos we've got 1 to 3 likes, I think that's such an improvement, and we really hope you do enjoy our podcast.
Yeah, it is also important to note for the F-18 that we talked about for Riyadh. By the time this goes out, the next takeoff Thursday will have been announced. So I can't wait to see what that will be, and we'll mention it in next week's as well.
Yeah. So we have the Firebirds as well. We can sort of compare them with Team Raven, another similar aircraft group. The Grumman Turbo Firecat, which surprised of the service ceiling about it, considering that the RV4 can go higher. And like Joey just said, the Finnish Air Force F-18C from Finland, which we briefly touched on as well. We really do hope you have enjoyed this week's podcast. Me and Joey are both ill, but we've tried to power through this and give you the best quality I think we've done out of the. Well, this is the fourth podcast. So out of the 4 podcasts we have done this week, since
Yeah.
we started.
Yeah, there is a lot of cuts of us coughing and sneezing during this, so we have cut all those out, and we've just made it as smooth as possible, considering we are both very ill.
Yeah, we really do hope you've enjoyed. I think, considering the fact me and Joey are both ill, this is the absolute best that we have done so far. We've done so much research this week. We might even put a screenshot of all the news articles that we've sent to each other and all the research that we've done. And I think that research has paid off. We did have to delay the recording by a few days because of how ill Joey is. Luckily, he's feeling a bit better now, so we could record it. And yeah, so hope you buy the merch. Hope you enjoy the podcast, and we will see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye.